When I walked in, my mother-in-law said, "My daughter's kids eat first. Her kids can wait for scraps." My children sat quietly by their empty plates. My sister-in-law added, "They should know their place." I said nothing. I just took my kids and left. They thought I was defeated. Minutes later, their house filled with screams they never expected. I stood frozen in the doorway of my in-laws' house, watching my 9-year-old daughter stare at an empty plate while her cousin ate their third helping of lasagna. That's when I heard Addison's voice cut through the dining room like a blade. "My daughter's kids eat first. Her kids can wait for scraps." My mother-in-law didn't even look up as she served Harper another generous portion. Peyton, my sister-in-law, noticed me standing there and smiled. She leaned toward where Mia and Evan sat on bar stools at the kitchen counter, their plates completely empty, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "They should know their place." Roger, my father-in-law, nodded from his recliner, fork halfway to his mouth, as if this cruelty was simply common sense. I didn't say a word. I walked over to my children, helped them gather their things, and left that house in complete silence. They thought I was defeated. They thought I had finally accepted my role as the walking bank account, the outsider who should be grateful for crumbs of acceptance. They thought I would come crawling back like I always did. What they didn't know was that in exactly 18 minutes, their entire world would begin to collapse, and the screaming would start. But to understand why that moment shattered everything, you need to know how I became their personal ATM in the first place, how I went from being Wyatt's fiance to being the family bank, and how 6 years of generosity turned into a weapon they used against my kids. It started 2 months before my wedding when Addison called me at work, her voice trembling with what sounded like genuine distress. Property taxes had increased unexpectedly, she said. Could we help just this once? $3,000. She promised to pay it back within months. I was a senior project manager at a pharmaceutical company, and while $3,000 wasn't nothing, it wasn't impossible either. I wrote the check that same day. Wyatt was so grateful when I told him. He hugged me and said his family was lucky to have me. I didn't tell him that I wasn't just being generous. I was desperate. My parents had died in a car accident during my junior year of college, leaving me with a modest inheritance and a huge hole where family should have been. Wyatt's family looked like everything I'd lost. A mom who baked pies from scratch, a dad who told funny stories, a sister with 2 sweet kids who called me Aunt Leah within weeks. When Addison hugged me and called me the daughter she'd always wanted, something inside me healed just a little. I thought I'd found my place. I didn't realize I'd just made the first payment into a system that would bleed me dry. 3 months after the wedding, Roger needed a medical procedure. Insurance covered most of it, but not all. $5,000 this time. Addison cried when she asked, talking about how proud he was and how embarrassed he felt needing help. I signed that check even faster than the first because her gratitude made me feel needed in a way I hadn't felt since my parents died. That should have been my first warning. That's when I should have asked why Peyton, his adult daughter, wasn't contributing, why their savings couldn't cover a $5,000 gap, why every family emergency seemed to land on my shoulders. But I didn't ask because I wanted to be the good daughter-in-law, the one who understood that family helps family, the one who belonged. My career had taken off after grad school. At 31, I was a senior project manager making nearly 3 times what Wyatt earned as a high school biology teacher. His family noticed the pay gap immediately. They praised him for marrying someone so successful while squeezing my arm and smiling warmly at me as if love and gratitude and calculation were all mixed together. Addison told me how proud she was that Wyatt had stability now. I didn't realize she was calculating my worth in dollars. The requests escalated with eerie precision. Every promotion, every bonus, every raise somehow triggered a new crisis. A surprise roof emergency right after my raise, $15,000. A contractor's estimate conveniently emailed to my office the same afternoon Addison called, like she'd been waiting. Roger's truck died right after my year-end bonus. He needed a reliable vehicle to get to his part-time job, so I put down $22,000. Then came Peyton's crisis. Her divorce from an abusive husband turned ugly, and she needed a custody lawyer to protect Harper and Liam. $12,000 in legal fees. Addison sobbed on the phone, telling me family sticks together and we protect our own, and asking, "Don't you want to help keep those babies safe?" Of course I did. I wrote that check before Wyatt even knew. What I didn't ask was why Peyton's own parents, who owned their house outright, couldn't pay her legal fees. I didn't want to ask. I wanted to be the hero, the savior, the one they were so grateful for. 6 years of this followed. 6 years of roof repairs, truck payments, dental work, medical bills, legal fees, tight months, and unexpected costs that always synced suspiciously well with my financial wins. I was told constantly that I was generous, selfless, the daughter-in-law every mother dreams of. What I didn't track was the complete absence of reciprocity. When Mia was hospitalized with pneumonia and I desperately needed help with Evan, Addison was too busy with her church group. When I had a miscarriage and could barely get out of bed, Peyton didn't bring a single meal. When Wyatt and I begged them to babysit so we could reconnect for one weekend to save our marriage, everyone suddenly had prior commitments. But when they needed money, I was family, sacred and obligated. Wyatt never really questioned it. He'd been raised in a house where his mother's word was law, and Peyton, as the biological daughter, was the son the whole family orbited. He truly believed financial support was proof of love. I wanted so badly to be a good wife and a good daughter-in-law that I ignored my gut. They rarely asked about my work or celebrated my achievements. They praised Peyton's part-time boutique job as if she were carrying the world, while my 60-hour weeks were brushed off as corporate stuff. Their house was full of photos of Harper and Liam, but none of Mia or Evan. I kept telling myself I was imagining it because being the difficult outsider terrified me more than being used. So I kept writing checks and showing up to Sunday dinners, cooking and cleaning while Peyton sat scrolling her phone. I kept hosting holidays because Addison's back hurt too much, then watching her play on the floor for hours with Harper and Liam without a hint of pain. I kept telling myself that this was just how family worked. Until the day I walked in and saw my children sitting in front of empty plates while their cousins feasted. Until I heard Addison call my kids scraps. Until Peyton looked into my children's faces and told them they needed to know their place. That's when the willful blindness shattered. That day had started like any other chaotic Tuesday. I dropped the kids at camp, sat through back-to-back presentations at work, and by 4:30 p.m. realized I wasn't going to make pickup at 5. I texted Addison under the conference table. "Running late. Could you grab the kids and keep them until 7? I'm so sorry." Her answer came back in 30 seconds. "Of course, would love to spend extra time with them. Take all the time you need." That should have been my first red flag. Addison never volunteered for extra time with my kids. There was always a reason she couldn't, but I was relieved and exhausted, so I believed it. I texted again at 6:45 to say I was on my way. She replied with a smiley and said dinner was ready whenever I arrived. Dinner should have been my second warning. When I pulled into their driveway at 7:15, the house smelled like heaven. Garlic, tomato sauce, fresh bread. I walked down the hallway toward the combined kitchen and dining room and froze at the doorway. Harper and Liam sat at the formal dining table with overflowing plates of lasagna, garlic bread, and lemonade in crystal glasses. Cloth napkins. The nice plates Addison only used on holidays. They were laughing, carefree on what looked like their third helping. 15 feet away at the kitchen counter, my kids sat on bar stools with perfectly empty plates. No crumbs, no drinks, no utensils, just cold, white ceramic. Their hands were folded in their laps. They watched their cousins eat like spectators at someone else's life. Addison stood at the table serving Harper another big spoonful of lasagna. Peyton sat there scrolling her phone, sipping lemonade. Roger watched the news from his recliner, plate on his lap. Nobody had even noticed me. "Oh, Leah, perfect timing," Addison said when she finally glanced up. "We just finished dinner." Finished. As if my kids had eaten too. My throat closed. I walked to my children and knelt so I could see their faces. "Hey, babies, how was your day?" "Good," Mia said carefully, in that too neutral tone she uses when she's trying not to upset anyone. Evan shook his head. They played different games. My heart tightened. What did everyone have for dinner? I asked, already knowing the answer would hurt. Grammy made lasagna, Harper chirped proudly from the table. It's really good. And what did you two have? I asked my kids. Mia looked at Addison before answering. That tiny glance told me everything. We weren't that hungry, she said quietly. Actually, there wasn't quite enough for everyone, Addison interjected smoothly. So I made them grilled cheese earlier. They were fine with it. Children don't need full meals every single time they're here. I turned and stared at the lasagna pan, still half full on the counter. At least 6 servings left. Enough for my kids twice. She was lying, to my face. I think I'll make them plates now, I said, reaching for a serving spoon. Leah, honestly, they're fine, Addison said, sharpness creeping into her tone. They already ate. My voice turned cool. Harper and Liam seem to need seconds and thirds. I'm sure there's enough for everyone. The room went quiet. My daughter's children have different nutritional needs, Addison said finally, like this was a medical conversation, not pure cruelty. Her kids can wait for scraps if there's not enough to go around. That's just how it works in blended families. I stared at her, feeling something in me crack. As I served lasagna onto 2 plates, Peyton walked over to my children and smiled down at them. You two are sweet kids, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. But you should know your place in this family. My children come first. That's just how it is. Evan's eyes filled with tears. Mia's hand tightened around the fork she was barely allowed to use. From the living room, Roger said, "Best they learn it young." That was it. Something inside me snapped clean in half. Come on, kids, I said quietly. Get your things. We're leaving. Addison rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic, Leah. We can talk about this. Talk about what? I asked calmly, putting the plates in the microwave to warm for my kids. About how you think my children are second class. About feeding them scraps while their cousins feast. The microwave beeped. I set the hot plates in front of Mia and Evan. Their eyes lit up like this was a miracle. They shouldn't have to be that grateful for basic food. You're twisting everything, Roger said. Whoa, we love those kids. I looked him dead in the eye. When's the last time you came to one of Evan's baseball games? Silence. When's the last time you asked about Mia's science fair project? She won second place. You didn't even know, did you? Nothing. While my kids ate, I asked about their day. They told me Harper and Liam went to the park with Grammy while they stayed inside watching little kids' cartoons because Grammy could only safely take 2 kids and Harper and Liam asked first. They'd been left behind because they weren't the real grandkids. All afternoon, all summer, always. I looked at Addison. So, you couldn't take 4 kids to the park? Just 2? It's a safety issue, she said. Harper and Liam know the rules. I didn't want to risk... Risk what? I cut in. Risk my children existing at the same level. Peyton jumped in again, casually mentioning upcoming pool parties and a family reunion on her mom's side that weren't really appropriate for everyone. Translation: my children weren't welcome. The words blood family floated through the room like poison. I saw the wall of photos, all Harper and Liam, none of Mia and Evan. In that moment, I saw the architecture of the entire system, years of subtle exclusion building toward open cruelty. Come on, kids, I repeated. We're leaving. Addison tried. We shouldn't do this in front of the children. You should have thought of that before you did it in front of the children, I said. I walked them out, buckled them into the car, and pulled away. We made it 3 blocks before Mia's small voice broke the silence. Mom, why don't Grammy and Pop-Pop like us as much as Harper and Liam? The question felt like someone dropped a stone into my chest. I could have lied. I almost did. Instead, I said, they should love you exactly the same. Grandparents are supposed to love all their grandkids equally. If they don't, that's their failure, not yours. Evan added quietly, we're not blood family. Aunt Peyton said so. I had to pull over because I couldn't see through my tears. My 7-year-old had already accepted that he was lesser in his own family. I asked how long it had been going on. They traded a look. Always, Mia said. We thought maybe we were being too sensitive. Always, every visit, every Sunday, every holiday. I drove home with rage and shame burning through me. Wyatt was in the kitchen when we walked in. I told him everything. His first reaction was exactly what I'd expected. They probably didn't mean it like that. You know how mom talks. Family dynamics are complicated. I stared at him. She said our kids can wait for scraps, Wyatt. Your sister told them to know their place. Your father agreed. How much more context do you need? He flinched, but still clung to his programming. They've always been good to us. That was the last straw. I went to the office, opened my laptop, and pulled bank statements for the last 6 years. I started listing every payment. $3,000 here, $5,000 there, $15,000 for the roof, $12,000 for the lawyer, $22,000 for the truck, thousands more for utilities, medical bills, emergencies that never ended. When I totaled it, my blood ran cold. $134,000, I said. We have given your family $134,000 in 6 years. Wyatt stared, stunned. That can't be right. It's right, and show me one repayment. There were none. I called my best friend Rachel, who works as a paralegal. I told her everything. She'd watched this pattern for years and had tried to gently warn me. Now she laid it out clearly. I was co-signer on their mortgage. I'd guaranteed the truck loan. I was paying part of Peyton's rent. Leah, she said, you're not just giving them money, you're legally holding up their entire lifestyle. You can also walk away. She explained that I could remove myself as co-signer and withdraw as guarantor. The bank and dealership would notify them and give them limited time to refinance or pay up. If they couldn't, foreclosure and repossession would follow. It would be devastating. And for the first time, I considered that maybe devastation was exactly the consequence they'd earned. I spent the night researching co-signer removal, loan guarantees, mortgage law. I barely slept. By morning, I knew exactly what I could do. Another thought kept looping in my head. 18 minutes. My kids had sat there for 18 minutes watching their cousins eat. So I made a decision. I dropped the kids at camp, called my accountant and lawyer, and initiated everything. I removed myself from the mortgage. I revoked my guarantee on the truck loan. I cut off Peyton's rent support. The bank would call them within 24 to 48 hours. The dealership would give Roger 30 days. The landlord would notify Peyton when her rent came up short. I looked at the time before making the calls. Then I timed everything. At 7:02 p.m., I made the final confirmation. At 7:20 p.m., Addison called me, already panicking. Leah, honey, the bank called. They said you removed yourself as co-signer. There must be some mistake. We'll lose the house. I put her on speaker so Wyatt could hear. There's no mistake, I said calmly. I removed myself and stopped all payments. You can't do that, she cried. We're family. Yesterday, you told my children they could wait for scraps, I replied. You told them to know their place. This is yours. I hung up. Minutes later, Roger called, raging about destroying the family. I let it go to voicemail. Then Peyton called, sobbing that I'd stopped paying her rent and she'd lose her apartment. My kids will be homeless, she wailed. You can't do this to my children. I remembered my children's empty plates. You did this when you treated my kids like they were less than human, I said. Ask your parents for help. Oh, right. They're about to lose their house, too. I timed it all. 18 minutes after I'd pulled the trigger, the panic calls were in full swing. Exactly 18 minutes, the exact length of my children's humiliation. The next morning, the calls and texts doubled. Addison alternated between weeping, guilt-tripping, and raging voicemails. Roger threatened legal action. Peyton called me every name she could think of. My lawyer shut that down quickly with a cease and desist letter. Then another twist. Wyatt's Aunt Linda called. Addison had told her I'd been financially abusive and controlling for years, and Linda had been sending them $1,500 a month for 3 years, trying to keep them afloat. I sent her the spreadsheet and a recording I'd made at that dinner where you could clearly hear Addison say, my kids could wait for scraps. Linda was furious. At them, not me. She cut them off immediately and called Roger to unleash hell. Turns out Addison had been running this pity scam on multiple relatives, painting me as the villain while cashing their checks and mine. Over the next few weeks, Wyatt slowly saw the full picture. He overheard Mia asking if Grammy was mad because we stopped giving her money, and realized our 9-year-old now understood that her grandparents' affection had always depended on cash. That broke him. We started marriage counseling. It wasn't pretty. There were fights, nights in the guest room, old wounds ripped open. Dr. Chin, our therapist, forced him to face how deeply his mother had trained him to prioritize her emotions over everyone else's, and forced me to see how my fear of being alone made me ignore my instincts. Meanwhile, consequences rolled forward like an avalanche. Addison and Roger couldn't refinance without my credit and income. The bank started foreclosure. Roger's truck was repossessed when he couldn't take over the payments alone. They ended up in a small 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat in a neighborhood they used to sneer at. Peyton found a roommate and picked up a second job. I thought I'd feel a satisfaction seeing them struggle after years of using me. Instead, I mostly felt done. Then, months later, a handwritten letter arrived from Addison. No sweetheart, no honey, just dear Leah. She admitted it all, that they'd treated my children poorly, that they'd favored Peyton's kids, that she'd been jealous of my education and independence, that she'd used my need for family to keep me paying while never truly accepting me or my kids. She said losing the house had forced her to face herself, and that she wasn't asking for money, only the hope that someday she might have a chance to be a real grandmother to Mia and Evan. I read it 3 times. I showed it to Wyatt. It was the first truly honest thing she'd ever given me, but one letter doesn't erase years of harm. We asked the kids what they wanted. Mia said, "Maybe when I'm older. Right now I'm not ready." Evan shrugged and said he didn't really miss them. That was our answer. In therapy, Wyatt began setting real boundaries, limiting calls, stopping emotional blackmail at the door, refusing to be the middleman. We focused on our little family. Slowly, I watched our children unwind the damage. Mia stopped apologizing for existing. Evan stopped shrinking and started being loud, goofy, fully 7. They stopped scanning rooms for grandparents who never showed up. They stopped asking why they weren't enough. One night, months after the explosion, we ate pasta together at our own table, just the 4 of us. No one was ranking children. No one was keeping score. There were sauce stains, loud laughter, and overlapping stories, and as I looked at my family, I realized this is what love is supposed to feel like. Safe, equal, unconditional. I had burned down something toxic and built something real in its place. I'd spent years trying to buy my way into a family that would never truly love my kids. I'd funded their comfort while they taught my children they were second class. When I finally lit the fuse and timed their collapse to match 18 minutes of my children's pain, I didn't do it for revenge. I did it for justice and boundaries. I did it to show my kids that love should never cost their dignity, that they never have to accept scraps from anyone, and that their mother will always choose them, even if it means the whole world screams. This story of justice and boundaries had you hooked from start to finish. My favorite part will always be when I matched my revenge to those same 18 minutes my children sat with empty plates, because that's when I stopped being their ATM and finally became their protector.